Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here. And in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at how you can use light textures and gobos inside of Blender to create this sort of dappled light, or any kind of light really, in your scene. It's a cool way to bring some more life into your scene, where you're not just using a static light that's just all directional and illuminates everything equally. So just to quickly brush up on some terminology here. The only really new thing, which I think is unknown to a lot of people, is the word gobo. So gobo is just what we have in, we'll take a look at our viewport here, is just this. It's like a stencil in front of your light source, so it sort of like casts light through this light source. It's just a way for us to modify our lights in order to, achieve a different result.
You can see how insanely boring the lighting is without this setup.
Yeah, it's not the most interesting. So this is just a quick scene where we've modeled some props and now we want to set up some lighting. So one important thing to note here is that this is not going to work with a sunlight, which it's a little annoying, but sunlights are infinitely far away and you need an object to block the light in terms of the light textures. This will work with the gobos, but to start off with, we will just take a look at the light texture. So go back here. So first off, let's add a light. I'm going to use a spotlight and let's see, just position this sort of roughly. All right, so we got our light, and the first thing we want to do is we want to enable use nodes for this. So I brought up the just the shader editor here just so I have access to all my nodes. And then very importantly, we're using the Node Wrangler add-on. So just go to your add-ons, it's default in Blender, search for Wrangler or Node, and just enable that, because that allows us to just hit Control T, and that sets up a sort of an image texture workflow for us to use. This is pretty useful for a lot of things in Blender. We showed it using HDRIs, but you can use it for a bunch of different things. Then in our image texture, we'll just plug in a image texture. This is a pre-painted texture I did. So this it's tileable and it's a black and white image. Then we'll just increase our intensity a little bit here. And now you can see nothing is actually happening with our light. It's just illuminating something, but nothing's happening. So an important step is right now it's connecting the UV to the vector. So we don't want to do that. We want to connect the normal to the vector. And that way it now produces this really cool looking result. So now just the texture, it's being projected from within the spotlight. Now there are a few different things we can do to tweak our spotlight. First off, I'll just increase the intensity a little more. It doesn't really matter if you do it in the strength of your node or whether you do it in the light. Next up, a really cool way to tweak this is by adjusting the size. So if we set this lower, we're going to get a sharper shadow, meaning sort of like the light where the objects are closer to the ground, and vice versa. If we do it higher, it's going to be more blobby. So for this, we'll just do like a value of this, something like that. Then we can also affect the area of where the spotlight hits by just increasing the size of our angle for the spotlight here, like 90, 120. And using Shift T, we can sort of like position our light around just so we get really cool effects. Move it over, and then we get this dappled light here. Now you can go into your mapping node, and let's say we want to adjust the tiling for this, just so maybe it's filtering through more. Let's say there's a lot more leaves in this forest, for example, so it has to filter through that. Now the problem with using this method alone is that, especially as we scale this more and more, we end up with kind of a tiled look. So a really cool way to break this up is to combine the light texture with using a gobo. So the gobo is the stencil in front. So this is also where we want to show you a different way of doing it. Now this was a custom painted map, but you can actually do everything inside of Blender. You don't need external maps at all. So first thing we want to do is add a plane. Scale it up a bit. That's a very small plane. There we go. And then we'll sort of just get this into position. So we'll sort of like just think about where do we want this to block the light from, maybe here. So now like there's basically a gobo built into the light, and there's a gobo in front of the light. And then to this, we just want to apply a transparent BSDF shader. So let's find the transparent BSDF. And now light is just going to shine through it because technically there's nothing happening on this object anymore. In the color tab, just go down and hit the noise texture, or if you wanted to reuse your texture from before, you can use image texture. But for this, we'll just use noise. And now you can see that it's added a noise. The problem is it actually adds color information as well, because that's what's stored in our noise texture. So to get rid of all that, we're going to have to do a few things. First of all, Control T again to get the node wrangler up, and this is where we can adjust, let's say, our tiling. If we wanted more tiling, we might use that, we might not. Or you can also just control this in the scale of the noise itself. So in order to effectively control this noise, like if we look at it here, now it's more apparent where the color is actually coming from. We can add a color ramp. So just search for color ramp. And then place that there. And now it's turned it into black and white because black and white are the only two colors in our ramp. Then let's crunch these two together a little bit. And now you can see we're actually getting a lot more intensity on this. And then you can modify this to your heart's content. You know, if you want it to be really contrasty, like maybe it's the leaves are really hard like this, something like that. And you have a pretty cool texture. Now the cool thing is you can combine that with the default built-in like parameters for the noise. So let's say we wanted more tiling, set this to 10. Now you can see that we're getting these bigger areas that then block out the light. So now it's actually not, it doesn't have that tiled feel anymore. Let's Control or let's H to hide that. So you can see we get rid of this more procedural look, which is almost what we wanted. And just by adding a gobo in front of it, we can break this up. And then you'll be able to stack these on top of each other or duplicate it around, rotate it, maybe scale it a little bit to have it affect other areas of your scene as well. But this is a really cool way to just adjust it. And one thing that Henning and I were talking about before was you could actually use this to create like an animated scene as well. So just throw this in there, and then with over time, maybe you wanted to animate the scale, the detail level, maybe the distortion as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities to like play with your light in your scene.
One thing to keep in mind here as well is whenever you're lighting anything, it is essential that you're looking through the actual render camera. Like before you start doing any of this fancy stuff, it's a really good idea that you have something locked down in terms of the camera angle, because the lighting is just so dependent on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to be moving these planes around in completely random spots. You really want to light to the shot.
Now, the cool thing here is like we could go back to our light, for example, and instead of using this light texture here, we just go in, we apply a noise texture to this as well. Basically, we could apply the same one as well if we wanted to, but same process as before. Find a color ramp, plug that in there. Now it's black and white. Crunch the values. And again, now we have a different look here. Then we could scale this to, let's say, to 10. And then already there, we have a very different look for our scene. So I think there's a lot of really cool use cases for this. And it's a cool way to make procedural looking lighting, especially if it's something that's animated. I think this has a lot of potential. But yeah, it's just something that we wanted to share with you guys in order to spice up your lighting inside of Blender. And like I said, you can use this only in Blender. You can apply different kinds of nodes. It doesn't just have to be the noise node. Experiment around with it, see what kind of look you get. And I think that's about everything we want to cover for this. So if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications. And thanks for watching.